First, again, thank you for being here, for spending some time to learn more about our process. We've come a long ways. We've issued over nearly 50 licenses on the producer and wholesaler side, and we understand how critical it is that we explain carefully the process that laboratories need to go through on the OLCC side and our coordination with ORLAP. So this meeting is going to be one of many in making sure we explain how our processes work and how they intersect with local government processes and what's going on over at the Oregon Health Authority. So after I explain the kickoff, we're going to have a message from Will Higlin, who's the Senior Director of Licensing and Compliance. We're going to have a rules overview by Amanda Borup, who's a policy analyst here, and she'll explain some of the unique features of our system, which may be a little different from your experience if you're a current operator in the medical program or if you're coming from another state. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time with the METRC system, and we're going to spend time inside of our sandbox that we've set up talking about the requirements as they relate to our rules and the way that the technology operates, about how you'll be able to enter in data so that you give the OLCC the right information we need to perform our regulatory capacities to track cannabis through the system. You'll be able to see some examples of how to create and send, receive packages, create transfer manifests to send them in between our various licensees. So today with us, my name is Nathan Ricks, and I'm the Project Portfolio Director and a Policy Analyst. Myra Chin from METRC here is at the computer, and you'll be hearing from her later when we get to the METRC demonstration. Amanda Borup mentioned is Policy Analyst here. TJ Sheehy is a data analyst with our program and our expert in the METRC system. And Sherry Denholm is sitting right in front of me here. She'll come up and talk a little bit more about METRC after our break. The meeting is going to be recorded, so if you missed something, don't feel like you have to take notes carefully. You can come back and listen to the program. And if you have a friend or a partner with your laboratory that's unable to be here, we're going to put this up on the website so you can access it later on. And it'll be made available for download. One thing I'll ask, if you've already submitted an application, and I believe there are 7 of you that can pat yourself on the back, you've already submitted your application to OLCC. If you have a specific question about your application, I ask that you hold on to that and save it for during a break time or for the end when you can talk to someone from the compliance team, or that you just save it for the assigned investigator to your application. We want to use the most of this time to ask general questions about rules, about the compliance system metric. So again, we want to aim to end the program here by 11:30, and we hope you get the most out of this. Again, it's going to be available for download. All of our information is at marijuana@oregon.gov, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to our listserv that's on the website, and make sure you take advantage of all the resources we have on there. We have a business readiness guidebook that'll help you navigate some of the other state agency processes that have nothing to do with our license process, but that are going to be critical to being a successful operation in Oregon. And also take advantage of our rules page, where we're going to be providing updates to our rules because there are going to be a lot of changes throughout the month as we turn our temporary rules into permanent rules and make revisions over the coming months. So without further ado, Will Higlin.
Yay. Well, good morning. Thanks for coming. We really do appreciate it. I just wanted to just start off by giving you an overview of kind of where we are, where we've come. We've come a long way. Do I need to sit by my phone? So things have been pretty exciting, obviously, and we've been doing a lot of work. We're actually processing licenses now. We're issuing licenses, as many of you know. And so we've run the whole gamut. So things are starting to process a lot quicker and more efficiently than they did in the beginning, as you can imagine. The producer licenses will be and have been the most challenging because of the outdoor producers and a lot of waivers that we've had to deal with, which is all good because we've had a lot of back and forth with the industry to try to get people into compliance. You know, we came into this thinking we're trying to get rid of the illegal market or do the best we can. And the only way to really do that when you're taking over an industry like that is to be open, transparent, and really listen to encourage people to come into the regulatory market, because we're not the big bad wolf, I keep saying. We're not going to be hiding behind trees trying to see people doing things that are wrong and right in violations. We really want this industry to shine, but it's our job to regulate it, and that's a government responsibility. And within that regulatory box, we've been trying to say we want to provide as much service as we can to help people be successful. And frankly, the staff, I think, has done a tremendous job. So far, we've been really pleased. So we've issued, 60 or 70 licenses. I think we're going to see that number go up. Like I said, now that the process is in place, we'll probably do 10 to 20 potentially a week. But we're moving on now through the cycle as well. So we've only focused on outdoor production for the most part. But we've always said we want to get our system up and operational by October. We're probably behind where we thought we might be 6 or 8 months ago when we looked at, processing licenses because of the waivers, and it's slowed down the process on the outdoor grows. But I'm convinced, I don't know yet, but as we move out of outdoor into indoor and processors, laboratories, and ultimately retailers, those are more brick and mortar. There's not the waiver process that's going to be so extensive, and I think that licensing process will go much faster. That's my hope anyway, as we get into that. But we are committed to getting this up and operational by October. That's where I get nervous, and that's where all of you fall in. The labs are obviously tremendously critical to us meeting our goals. So thank you for coming today so you can see the METRC system. My message to you is you all have different business models, different goals, different expectations, but just from the OLCC side, we're encouraging you to apply for your license. The OHA rules go into effect October 1st that will require all the product to be tested, but you can imagine if our goal is to try to open up retail in October, we would like to have you certified before October 1st so we can get product through the pipeline and ready for sale in October. So that's the critical point for us. Potential bottleneck, but like I said, you all make your own business decisions and things like that, but we're really encouraging, if it fits your business model, to get in the application process parallel with your certification so we can get you up and running, get you certified, so when we do open up our retail stores, we can get product through the system and available for consumers. So that's all I really wanted to say is that, and then really thank you again for coming to take time out of your day to see the METRC system. If you do have questions about licensing and all those things, as Nathan said, we're here, we've got all the experts here, so after this is over with, if you have specific questions, anything we can help you with, just let us know, and we'll do the best we can to do that. So again, thanks for coming, and that's it.
Thanks, Will. So there are 2 OLCC staff in the room that I want to point out in particular. We have several others, but there are 2 I want to highlight, and it's a bonus for those of you that came in person. Danica Hibschman, the statewide director of licensing for liquor and marijuana, and Patrick Owen, who's the lead compliance specialist for inspection work. And so if you have any questions about the licensing process, they're going to be your go-to people, and I'll ask if they just show where they are in the room to you all. So on break, you might be able to nab them and ask some questions. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Borup, who's going to give an overview of our rules.
It'll just take a second. I think you could click for me. Sure. Looks like our clicker is not going to work. Okay, good morning. So I want to apologize. I was a couple minutes late. I, for some reason, had on my calendar 9 o'clock, and then I realized it was really supposed to be 8:30. So I want to give you a quick overview of just the OLCC rules as far as the application process goes and the security requirements and things like that. The first slide I'm going to go over is just kind of the state agency coordination. I'm sure this is going to be something that you guys already know, but I like to start every presentation with this just to make it completely clear like where the responsibilities sit. So the OLCC is responsible for licensing the growers, which are the producers, processors, wholesalers, retail establishments, and laboratories. And we also have a research certificate. We're not responsible for any like public possession, the home grow, and aspects of Measure 91 that are like that. We also don't have any authority over the medical marijuana program, except for we make the rules for packaging for both recreational and medical. So that's really the only overlap with the medical program we have. So the Oregon Health Authority still has the complete authority over the medical program. And so every store right now that's selling recreational marijuana in Oregon is actually registered through the Oregon Health Authority. There is a lot of confusion in the industry about that. A lot of people think since they're selling retail, they're a retail store, they're licensed by the OLCC, but they're not. They're registered as a medical dispensary. So it's good to keep that in mind. Like I said, I'm sure you all know that, but it's nice when you hear people say that they're a rec store, just to know for right now they still are a medical store. The Oregon Health Authority also develops the rules for labeling and dosage and testing for both markets. So that's really going to be the overlap that you see. They have those three categories, and then we have the packaging category. And it won't really relate to labs probably, but the Oregon OLCC, we have the authority for the packaging and labeling pre-approval. So before things are sold in an OLCC recreational store, they'll have to be pre-approved by somebody in our staff. The Oregon Department of Agriculture has the list of the pesticides, and then they're also responsible for the weights and measures. And then the Department of Revenue is tax collection, which will really affect the retail stores because it's a point of sale tax for the marijuana items. Next. Thank you. So as Will was talking about, the regulatory environment has really been educational at this point in time. You know, the OLCC is learning about this industry. We want it to be a success in Oregon, and to do that, we have to work with the industry and learn what people's business models are, what they believe best practices are, and be able to work that into our regulatory environment. And so we've been working really hard to try to make it fit so that it can be a well-regulated market, but then also people can continue to do business and be able to make profits as they have in the past. We have to keep public safety in mind, and with that we look at the Cole Memo. And the Cole Memo has the points from the federal government that basically says if a state follows these things, we really won't interfere with their medical or recreational program. And so we'll be talking about a lot of aspects of that today, especially with the cannabis tracking system. And then also, we won't really talk in depth about packaging and labeling or anything like that, but that's also one of the reasons that we're doing things that are that drastic, is just to keep the product out of the hands of children. Okay. And then this is my favorite slide always, the business readiness guide. It's a really, really great handout. It just quickly tells you how to run a really successful business in Oregon. There's things that are in there that you really wouldn't even think of probably, because all state agencies that have read it and other organizations that have read it write in and they say, oh, you know, we have something great to add, or somebody should call us. And we really do. We update it probably every 2 weeks or so. And everybody's really getting involved in it. So it's a great resource for the industry. And I often think a great resource for somebody just starting a new business, really. So this is kind of when we're going to get into the changes a little bit. So there's going to be a lot of changes to the rules in the next few months. So what's going to happen, mid-month, this month, our commission is going to approve our temporary rules. Basically, at that point in time, they're also going to approve a new set of temporary rules. So that new set of temporary rules is going to include 2016 legislation, and it's basically just going to take the place of the permanent rule. So it will overlap it, really. And what we're going to do is have it on our website, so it's very prominent which set of rules people need to be reading currently. We won't have links probably to all of them at the same place. We'll make it very clear where you need to be reading and where the current rules are that you need to be following. There is one section of the 2016 legislation. It's called the medical bump up. Basically what that does is allows producers to grow a section of medical with their recreational. That portion of the rule won't be coming until later in 2016. And then this handout actually is on our website as well. So it's kind of small, but if you want to look at it a little bit more in depth, it's really easy to see there. I think what's going to relate most to your work, we're going to start accepting marijuana worker permit applications on July 1st. And so everybody, based on the 2016 legislation that works in the marijuana industry, is going to need a worker permit. So we're going to have curriculum on our website, and then a test, and then there'll be an application for it as well. It's very, very similar. I always like to think of it as a mix between a server's permit and a food handler's card. It really talks about the basics of the rules, what people need to know while working in the marijuana industry, and then it's going to talk about ID checking and handling of marijuana. And we've made one test for everybody. And the reason for that basically is it gives employees the chance to be able to move through the market if they want to. So if somebody, for example, works for a grower, but then they also want to work at a retail store, or they want to work at a wholesaler, or maybe a lab, they would be able to have that one permit and be able to work within any license type. So that way they wouldn't have to continually apply with OLCC. And then another point is going to be, well, as Will said, October. That's going to be a big one. You already know that. And then the end of the year, December 31st, is when medical dispensaries will no longer be able to sell recreational products. So at that point in time, a medical dispensary will go back to being just a medical dispensary, or they'll be a retail store. There'll be no more of the commingling. So as I said, where the permanent rule is going to come into effect in the middle of June, which is just next week, really. And so that's going to streamline some security rules, and it's also adding a sampling laboratory. And the reason for the sampling laboratory addition is that laboratories now will actually go to the grow sites or go to the processors and collect samples. A lot of people had said that's going to be really difficult based on staffing. And so we added the sampling laboratory in so people could contract with the sampling laboratory. They'd have to be certified through ORLAP as well for sampling, and then they'd be able to go and take the samples on behalf of the lab. And then the temporary rules that will take place, and will cover up the permanent rules basically, are going to streamline the application requirements, because I'm sure most of you are aware that the residency requirement was taken away. And so that kind of changes the way that the application is going to be set up as far as who an applicant is. It doesn't have to be as confusing anymore. It can be more straightforward and like liquor. Yes?
I have a question about the sampling laboratory. Should they be vertically integrating with other licenses, or does it have to be its own independent business?
You know, that's a great question, and I don't know if everybody could hear. She's asking if the sampling laboratory can be other license types as well. And the way that it's written is that, and like I said, it hasn't been voted on yet, or hasn't been voted in by the commission, but the way it's written is that anybody with a laboratory license couldn't have ownership in another license type. And a laboratory license would include a sampling laboratory. And basically the reason for that, I'm sure you all could see it as a conflict of interest. You wouldn't want to be taking your own samples and testing them. That's the reason that they changed it and made it so that laboratories take samples rather than the growers take the samples themselves, or the processors take the samples themselves. The other changes are going to be an inventory transfer. So it's a one-time transfer from the medical into the recreational, and that product's going to need to be tested. So labs are really going to come into play at that point in time. And medical grade. So what's going to happen is that recreational licensees will be able to produce a medical grade product to be sold in recreational stores. And so you're probably going to see this at the processing level, where people will be processing up to the medical concentration limits. And then that product would only be able to be sold to card holders in recreational stores. And so it's something good to keep in mind, even though it's recreational and you're looking at the recreational limits for the testing, there'll also be the second category of medical grade recreational. And then, as I said before, worker permits for all employees. The land use compatibility isn't really going to be changing, but I think it's really important to talk about. So everybody's required to have a land use compatibility statement when they apply for an OLCC application. Basically what this is it's a paper that you bring to your local city or county, depending on where you're located. If you're an unincorporated county, you would take it to the county. And if you're within city limits, you take it to the city. And they're basically going to sign off saying that you're zoned correctly for the business that you're planning on doing. And then this is verification to the OLCC that you have been in touch with the city and the county, you're in a place where you can perform your business. And we need that in order to process the application. It's also important to note that local jurisdictions can place ordinances on time, place, and manner. So throughout the state of Oregon, there's going to be all kinds of different rules. So that's why it's really, really important that you do touch base with the jurisdiction that you live in to make sure that you're going to be complying with the rules that they happen to have there. And it's always a good idea to ask if there's anything that they're planning on changing in the near future. Hopefully they would be forthright and just tell you that, but if not, you can always ask if there's anything you should be prepared for in the upcoming months or in the upcoming years. Let me switch. This is a picture of our forms. If you go to our website and Forms and Publications, and you just click there, you can see all of the application forms. And this really streamlines the application process. If you go through this form step by step, you're going to effectively give us all the information that we want. It's really important to note that rather than just saying, which I'm sure you wouldn't, but rather than just saying plan to comply with 845025 you actually say how you plan to comply because we know everybody wants to, but we really want to know the steps that you're taking to actually comply with the rules. And that makes the job easier on our side as well, because when we're reading through it, we don't know your business model and we don't know exactly how you plan on doing business. So the more information we can get up front in a concise manner really will help us move through the application process, and then also make it so you don't have to spend as much back and forth on the time with an investigator. Okay. So the operations plan is the first, it's like the biggest form, it's the first plan. You talk about your security requirements, how you're going to train your employees, prevention of having minors enter a licensed premise, things like that. And the security is really the largest part of that portion of the application. Yeah. Yep.
I noticed that we, under OLCC, we have to ensure that minors don't enter the premises.
Mm-hmm.
But under OHA, if someone has a card and they're wanting to get their product tested, they would be able to. So for testing for both medical and recreational, how is that going to be resolved?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure that I have an answer for you right now.
Okay.
But yeah, Danica is going to work on looking that up, so we will.
And this is Nathan again. If we could follow up on that. So we're working on an interagency agreement to work out all of the different issues that are coming up between how we can resolve issues, not just with laboratory license, but how medical bump up is going to work, and any other responsibilities we have to share between the health authority and OLCC. So we'll likely include issues like that in the interagency agreement. Yep.
All right, so the security is, like I said, the largest section of the rules as far as operation plan goes. So all facilities are going to need to have commercial door locks. And so for that, you would just let us know the serial number of the door lock or take a picture of the door lock and describe, the brand so that you just verify on your application that it is a commercial door lock and not a residential door lock. We'll need to have alarm systems and video surveillance equipment. The camera coverage is continuous. It's 24 hours a day. It's not motion sensitive like some other states. So it would be continuous video coverage. The 90-day video archive is what's proposed in the new rules. Currently in the temporary rules it's 30 days. So I just, that's one of the points I wanted to highlight because that may change. So you're just going to want to keep an eye on that as the rules change. That one could be a switch in the security section. And the other switch in the security section could possibly be the offsite backup. Currently, it's required that you have an offsite video archive, but that could be changing to an onsite or an offsite. And so it's just another change I wanted to highlight so that you'll be aware of it when you're going through the security section and you're filling out your application. We do have security waivers. The security waivers probably we're going to be basically for outdoor growers for the most part, because they're going to have limited access to electricity, and they have a fencing requirement that they may or may not have to use. So it really was kind of made for the growers, but it is available to all licenses to apply for it if they feel like they can meet the criteria of our security rules in a different way. Generally speaking, though, all other license types are within a building and they will have electricity, and so it is not as much of a need probably for other license types, but it is important to know that it is there in the rules and available if you believe that you meet the qualifications. And, oh, no, that's good. And then I just wanted to give you an overview, just kind of where we are right now. I'm sure you guys have seen this on our website. If not, we post it daily. This is just a section. It's like a 2-page document that basically talks about all of the current applications that we have in. And so we have a total, like right over 1,000 applications that are in right now. And so it is going to be a large market. There will be, it's going to be a competitive market, a lot of growers, and so it's good to keep in mind that the people that are growing are going to be harvesting, not the outdoor growers, they won't be harvesting soon, but some of the indoors, when that starts, will probably have a pretty quick turnover. The greenhouses may as well, and they're going to need to have their product tested to be able to move it through the supply chain. Yep, Jeremy?
Just say that something that we've learned recently, there are outdoor license holders already that will have products harvested in July and August.
Yeah, so then even sooner than we thought. So the need is there, and I know there's a little bit of concern about, leaving the medical, or not leaving the medical, but transferring over and the new testing requirements and things like that, but it is going to happen eventually. I mean, as of October 1st, everything's going to need to be tested to the new requirements, and so it's just kind of getting ahead of the game in a lot of ways. All right, and with that, I'm going to leave you with my second favorite slide, which is the last one, our website and our phone number and our email address. And we really do, we answer the phone when we're available, when we're not in meetings, and we return emails. And so if you have questions, it's really nice when people ask them, because we do know that rumors can run just rampant, and it's way easier for everybody just to ask the question and get an answer rather than trying to guess what's going on. Thank you.
So if we could spend 10 to 15 minutes with Q&A, that would be great before we move on to the METRC presentation. And we can start with questions in the room. And if you're joining us on the phone via the webinar, you can submit questions via the chat box on the GoToMeeting. I'm thinking that's going to be the most orderly way to do questions rather than taking everybody off mute and trying to talk over one another. So if you refer to the chat box on the GoToMeeting, you can submit questions and then we'll read them so that everyone can hear them and write them down if you want. So we'll start with questions in the room.
Questions box, not chat box. Yes.
I'm sorry, not the chat box, the questions box in the GoToMeeting.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could give us a little more clarity on the sampling laboratory, on how that's going to work. Are you saying that we have to use a sampling laboratory, or can we do it with the sampling laboratory?
Okay, great. So he asked for a little bit more clarification on the sampling laboratory, and I'm just going to repeat them in case sometimes the microphones don't pick up great. It wouldn't be mandatory for a laboratory to use a sampling laboratory. It's just a separate license type that would be available if laboratories wanted to. Yep, Shannon.
So, sorry, Shannon O'Connell, Department of Justice. So you can, sampling, if you're going to only do sampling in the laboratory, it's a lower fee. But you can, right, so but it can be within your scope as a lab. If you want to do testing and sampling, that's fine. You could be a sampling only laboratory, in which case it's a little bit less of a fee on the OLCC side.
Does that clarify it, or did you?
I'm still kind of just confused, I guess. So the lab can send their own personnel out to the grow sites and pick up the samples, right, without having to be,
if it's within your scope, if it's within your accredited scope and or lab.
So since like we're not accredited at this moment, you put the rules in like next week, we're going to have to hire a sampling laboratory, or can we still do it as part of an ongoing SOP in preparation for accreditation?
So
October 1st.
Yeah, so everybody who is going to be licensed by the OLCC has to be accredited by ORLAP. And so part of your scope of your ORLAP accreditation would be sampling, if you wanted to do sampling. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Lisbeth Garcia. I'm in ORLAP. And I have shadow therapy here right now.
Do you want to come up to the microphone?
You can come up here, actually.
Yeah, come sit. Come sit by me.
Hi, my name is Lisbeth Garcia. I'm with ORLAP, and I have a few things to say. We're worried there. I know many people here are labs, and we only have one lab apply to be ORLAP certified so far. So I have some message from Shannon. Start an application in the database as soon as possible. It's imperative to get all the methods and performance-based SOPs added to our database and TNI labs. And so labs should do this right away, no matter how ready you are. So you can start the process and see all the problems you are going to have so we can work it out. If many labs wait until August or later to apply, we cannot guarantee accreditation by October. That's probably part of your question. So please have a complete application package and at least one technical method, potency or sampling. Sampling will be very easy probably to have. We prefer to have you completely ready, but if not, just bring it up, pesticides and solvents right now, or it will be a bottleneck to have all the labs at once. We cannot do that so quickly. We have to study your application. Please read the PT, the proficiency test and LOQ policies in our website. And I have some handouts here to distribute so you can read it. There are some PT studies that are going to open, so please keep an eye in our website or Finova for that. And I have some, we don't have a complete email list of all the labs, so I have some roster to pass around. You can write your name. And I think that's it. Do you have any question? Yes, Jeremy? Jeremy?
I have a question not directly on the ORLAP stuff. I'll pass for now.
Sort of a question, also part of a comment. A lot of us are probably real nervous about submitting applications because there are no reference methods for a lot of things that we're working on, and or the analyte list that's going to come down as permanent rules is either preventing a lot of technical challenges, or we're talking about adding equipment or all these things because we haven't been able to complete validation. That's our main concern as a lab, is that we don't try to work through the ORLAP application for a non-standard or a non-reference method, but so we understand how that is supposed to work. So even just the initial application part of ORLAP is the analytes aren't in there. There's not a reference method. We're trying to get, work with somebody at ORLAP to try to build that out. But, it's really is the real challenge is we won't be able to provide you guys with validation until the analyte list is complete.
But you can start with the perform-based method, so it doesn't have to be a reference. Just through some technical method, and let's start from there. And then all the methods that you want to add, we can ask TNI to add it to the database.
So we have a question from the call list. Will a grower be allowed to take samples with the lab for internal testing and data?
I don't think so. Well, if you are a sampling laboratory and that is in your scope, and you are accredited to sample, then you can do that.
And are we allowed to provide an accredited sample? Like, as long as you clearly indicate on the report that the sample was not taken in an accredited manner, like say for R&D purposes or something like that?
then it's just an analysis. It's not going to be just for your information and for,
Correct.
then that's, I think it's up to you, yeah. Just for your own information, but cannot be,
Just indicated they're not accredited test, but unaccredited sampling on the report, correct?
So I went ahead and I wrote that question down. The question was about unaccredited sampling. And so as I was talking about in the rules, so ORLAP's doing the certification process, Oregon Health Authority is writing the rules, and then Oregon Liquor Control Commission is actually licensing. So since there's so many different organizations involved, we can go ahead and take some of these questions that we may not have 100% answer for, and we can go ahead and do, probably what we'll do is some frequently asked questions around these after we have specific answers for the labs.
It was said that ORLAP was going to do a training for the sampling and provide an ADA training. Has that been scheduled yet?
Yes, we're looking for somebody to provide a training for that.
So the question was, will ORLAP provide a training?
We're looking for somebody to give an, yeah. Yes.
You have a question, generally when you said regarding potentially that they might not be able to accredit all the labs at the time if they place their applications are not put in early. In 1999, when the TNI standard was first implemented in Oregon, apparently it was the case that you were essentially issuing provisional licenses until an on-site could take place. Why does that not happen this time around?
So the question was, will there be provisional licenses issued through ORLAP?
I don't know the answer to that.
So we have one question from the call list. There was a deadline of February 29th for a laboratory to submit to OLCC their application and quality manual for provisional license. This did not execute as expected. How can we move the submittal to OHA to obtain a provisional so that we can begin testing to demonstrate capability for our ORLAP accreditation?
So Shannon O'Fallon in the back was talking, there was no February 29th date for the OLCC, but maybe Shannon can tell us what was going on.
So that date was to get on OHA's list. So you had to submit a quality manual to OHA by that February date in order to get on.
Shannon O'Fallon is approaching the bench. Thank you, Shannon.
Hi, it's Shannon O'Fallon from DOJ. So the Oregon Health Authority had a rule that said if you were a lab that was going to do testing on the medical side, that you had to submit a quality manual by that date in order to get on sort of its approved list. And so right now dispensaries can only accept tests from labs that are on that list. So that date has passed, but for labs that aren't on that list, once you get accredited and licensed by OLCC, then you'll be able to do tests for both the medical and the rec side.
Another question we have from the list here. On the change to video to continuous 24 and 90 days, this is a huge amount of data. Have you looked at the burden of cost on this? Can you share the rationale for continuous versus motion detection? Thank you.
Okay, great. So the rule actually didn't change around 24-hour video monitoring. That's been the same since our temporary rules went into effect in October. The change from 30 days to 90 days, like I said, is just something that may be changing between the temporary rule and the permanent rule, so it's something I want people to keep an eye on. The reason for the 24 continuous is that you can't, with motion detection, there's ways you can set the computer so that you don't pick up certain things. And so it's effectively like not really having motion detection. And because of that, we wanted to go ahead and start with the 24-hour surveillance because it is more of a surveillance method. Jeremy has a question in the back.
Yes, I have two separate questions. The first one is, with the workers permit, I guess, for individuals in the cannabis industry, how long is that training effective for, and do they have to do a new training yearly basis, or is it a one-time training and it's good?
Okay, so his first question was about the marijuana workers permit and how long that is valid. And the answer to that is it's a 5-year permit.
The second question I have is, if there is a laboratory that has multiple facilities, and understood we've already had a discussion with OLCC about if there's testing being performed in those separate facilities, those would have to have separate licenses per address. If there's not testing being performed, but there is a remote office or satellite office to serve as customer service or sample intake and logistics shipping type office, would that premises have to have a license?
So he asked about multiple locations, first of all, for testing, and that if multiple locations were in the business of testing, they would each need to have their own license. And then the second part of the question was about a remote office that wouldn't be doing testing, but that may be picking up samples or just being some sort of office space.
Potentially, samples would move through that office on en route to the actual testing facilities.
Yeah, so if any, so any premise that's going to be holding marijuana items would need to have a license.
What is the definition of holding?
So if you're
Overnight?
I think overnight, or maybe not, or any time, if it's present.
At any time.
If it's present.
So the question was, what's the definition of holding?
Yeah, well, that was, I'm the one that said holding, but yeah. I think that if you're bringing marijuana items into a premise, then you would need to have a license for that premise.
So another question from the online list. Due to the lack of data and need to use performance-based methods instead of reference methods, we cannot determine compliance based on document review alone as we did in 1999. I think this is an ORLAP
Yes,
question.
that's from Shannon, and that's response.
That's from Shannon.
Shannon contact. So that was an answer to your
That's
question.
my question.
Okay.
So can you better define a sampling lab and a distinction between the sampling lab? Just.
So the question is, define a sampling laboratory. So a sampling laboratory is defined in OLCC's rules, but it's a laboratory that's only going to be doing sampling under ORLAP protocols, which is why it has a lesser fee.
So starting in July for the lab applications, there's going to be specific endorsements that you apply for. So sampling, pesticides tests.
TJ.
Yeah. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm TJ. I'm the data analyst on the marijuana program. So starting at the beginning of next month, the licensing application system online for a laboratory application will have endorsements. So you apply to be sampling, testing pesticides, testing microbiologicals, the things that line up with the ORLAP certification. So if you apply, if you only check the box for sampling, you're a sampling only laboratory. If you check any other box, including sampling plus tests or just tests, you are a laboratory. So
With a higher fee.
yes, so there's a difference in fee. So if you only check sampling, it's 2,000 something, and if you do sampling plus testing or just testing, then it's I think 47.50 or so. So that's really that's the specifics of that.
I have a follow-up question on Jeremy. So, and I'll just use an example of if I have a sampling lab, I'm in Portland, Oregon is where my license based is, and I'm sampling that day in Medford, and I'm on the site all day long. My only option is at that point is to either stay at the grow site with the truck, or I'm sorry to be ridiculous, but or drive all the way back to Portland before I can be done, and so that I can bring the samples to my physical license location.
So his question was about if he had his lab was in Portland and he was picking up samples in Medford, that he would basically, he was wondering how he would be able to get that done in one day. And what's being reworked in our rules right now is transportation. So that would be considered part of transportation, and the rules are being changed to allow for people to move product throughout the state without having to worry about, overnight travel and such.
I understand. I mean, but I live in Portland. I want to return. But think about a lab that's doing testing or sampling, and for a 10-pound batch, that's a 30 to 60-minute endeavor. And if I'm in Medford and I'm doing an outdoor grow, then I'm going to be there for a day or two, sampling that entire lot, all the different batches. Where am I? Do I have to have a license, a sampling lab license in Medford? But I'm going to get it tested in Portland. I'm trying to understand where do I park?
No, and we definitely understand your concern. The question was just kind of a repeat of the first question. And really at this point in time, the best answer that we can give is that we're aware of that as far as laboratories and other license types, as far as transportation goes. And so we are reworking the rules so that things that you're talking about as far as being able to be in Medford and pick up samples, or maybe be in Medford for a couple of days and get samples, we're working on that in our rules. So that's something that you're going to see either in the proposed rules or in the temporary rules that cover, and the permanent rules. So it will be coming out soon.
As we look at the permanent rules and decide exactly our policy on that, the major concern that we have is that you're going to get trained on is that we can track it to the cannabis tracking system. So we always know where the marijuana is. So that's the number one thing. And then the security around your vehicle is where it's parked, is it a licensed premise, all those policy things are being worked out. But the number one concern is that we know where the marijuana is.
We're aware it's an issue.
So we have Jeremy in the back and then one more here on the screen.
Speaking, TJ mentioned microbiological testing, and with the what I would consider problems with the current proposed microbiological testing, with it being one, the target analytes not necessarily being justified, and two, that it's as demanded by the authority test. What if no laboratory actually goes through the accreditation process for these organisms on this matrix because it's not viable as a business to actually bring that program up if it's not known how often it will be tested?
So Jeremy's, this is Shannon O'Fallon from DOJ. Jeremy's question is about the testing for microbiological contaminants, which under the proposed testing rules right now is going to happen on a random basis to be established by the Oregon Health Authority and the Liquor Control Commission. And I think that those questions really go to OHA's rules and are appropriate for conversations with the Oregon Health Authority and probably, not appropriate for discussion here.
One question here, but first let me address this comment here from Shannon Swantek from ORLAP. Read up the one above here, who's also with ORLAP. Due to the lack of data and need to use performance-based methods instead of reference methods, we cannot determine compliance based on document review alone, as we did in 1999. So again, that's a comment from Shannon Swantek from ORLAP. So here's our next question. One cannot demonstrate capability for accreditation without testing the sample material. How can we obtain accreditation for licensure without the ability to test the material provisionality? Or how can we obtain licensure without accreditation? It seems we have a catch-22 unless you're already on the medical provisional testing laboratory list.
What the question is basically, if there's a new lab starting right now, they would not be able to test cannabis because they're not on the OHA list. They would also not be able to get accredited because they cannot actually test any cannabis, hence they cannot collect any data to validate their method to actually get accredited. That's what the question is.
Can they purchase cannabis as an adult over 21 and use it as?
Right, so this is Shannon O'Fallon from DOJ. I mean, not being on OHA's sort of approved lab list means you can't do testing for purposes of the product being provided to dispensaries because they can't accept that test result. But I don't think, I mean, as long as you are otherwise legally in possession of cannabis, there's no reason why a lab couldn't get cannabis and do it for purposes of, you know, getting accreditation.
Not only that, but if test results associated with it, you can use it as sort of travel sheet.
If you compare test results to reality in the state.
So we don't have any more questions from the call-in list. Any others in the room? One here.
I was wondering if you could clarify the weights and measures and what scales laboratories are going to be required to have. I asked the Department of Agriculture if what scales we needed, and it was unclear if we needed to purchase our analytical scale that we use for our analytical methods or just our incoming batch harvest scales. And I had a conversation with Shannon about that. It was unclear at the time of our conversation if that's what the information about this.
For your the laboratory, yes, you have to have an analytical balance and be calibrated according to the ORLAP P&I standard.
So this is TJ with OLCC. So for purposes of, this is going to come up, you'll see it in our permanent rules. Right now, ODA certifies all scales for all licenses. What we've done is realizing that ORLAP, as part of their accreditation process, already does accreditation for analytical scales. If a lab has an analytical scale that's being certified through the ORLAP process, that's going to meet our requirement. But if a lab has any other scale that's not being touched by the ORLAP process, it needs to be accredited by ODA. So for example, right now in our rules, a producer could bring their entire batch to the lab. The analytical scale isn't going to have the capacity to measure the 10 pounds or 9 whatever pounds. So if you have another scale to accept that batch, it would have to be on a scale that meets the requirements set out by ODA for precision and capacity. But then when you're actually sampling from it, you would use your analytical scale that's been accredited through the ORLAP process. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, and we have one more comment here from Shannon Swantek. The ORLAP response, if the laboratory does not have client data to review upon accreditation application, we will review all of the data that the laboratory has done for a method validation, but then continuing accreditation will include an additional audit and request for client data packages, which we will review on an ongoing basis until we are certain of your compliance with the client samples. One last question in front. Yeah.
Actually, a follow-up question directly to that. Does that mean during that process the lab would already be accredited?
So does that mean during the process the lab will already be accredited?
I think after the first visit, it's going to can take up to 60 days to give you the accreditation. After the first on-site, that doesn't mean you are accredited the next day.
No, I understand that, but I mean specifically request additional audit and request client data packages which will review on an ongoing basis. How long is this ongoing basis? And during that time, will we already be accredited?
Yeah, you can be accredited, but we continue. We can go to the lab on any time, unannounced.
So, and Shannon Swantek, I think, is agreeing with you as well. She says, yes, after the audit and corrective action, you will be accredited as we review your data for compliance. Great. So with that, let's take a 5-minute break. We're going to pause and mute the conference here for 5 minutes, and we'll return. Thank you for the folks from ORLAP and Shannon from DOJ for coming up and doing some of the Q&A with us.
And I have the...
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone on the phone. We're going to get started with the next part of the training. If you haven't already, the ORLAP policy on cannabis proficiency testing is up here at the front. And hopefully we can make this available electronically also. If you all send this to me, I can get it out to all of our web participants as well, so that everyone that attended the meeting can have this document. So Sherry Denholm and Myra Chen are here from METRC to present the webinar, and they're going to focus particularly on what's relevant for laboratories and those who are involved in sampling. And so without further ado, I'll pass it over to them, and I'll let them explain whether they want questions held towards the end or if you can sprinkle them in throughout.
Thanks, Nathan. My name is Sherry Denholm, and I am responsible for the support side of the METRC program, and that covers both a help desk as well as interfacing, particularly with labs, with testing requirements. As we've talked about today, they tend to change pretty frequently, the requirements within rules, especially in this emerging industry. So this plays a very pivotal point for you guys and for us together collectively, in that you have a resource within METRC to help understand when new rules, new requirements come out, how is that affected within the software, and then sometimes helping to further the learning curve with the licensees themselves, and making sure that that kind of smooths out sometimes bumpy road as things are getting more clear in the regulatory environment. So Myra, who is going to be taking over in just a moment to go through the software, she is our testing and training guru. She has been through the fire in Colorado, all of the ins and outs of the testing changes that has gone on there, and she's just a great resource that I'm sure you will all be able to benefit from. What we're going to do is go through the actual software itself, and you will see the manual entry of test results, and she's going to talk through those. But I just wanted to kind of level set that this is the manual entry side. We will have an API or an application programming interface, which would allow the LIMS system that you may be using in a lab to connect directly with the METRC system. Therefore, that manual entry would not be necessary, except in a case where you may need to transfer manifest something from your lab to another place. So I'm sure there will be some questions. We'll probably hold those questions until the end, and especially if you're online, using that question box. That way we can get through it, and then we can circle back to address any questions. Sound good? All right, take it away.
Okay, so we're going to give you a general overview. Before we get started, I am not a lab person. The amounts I put in will not be probably anywhere close to anything that you would test, so don't laugh too loud. Secondly, we're not going to enter all of the test results, because at this point that's still being determined. I don't want anybody shooting the messenger. I'm just showing you how it could look possibly in the future. So we're just kind of giving you a little peek, okay? So everybody knows what a package looks like, but in the future you're going to see the package tags attached up here at the top left for the RFID technology package tags, okay? Each one will have their own unique package identification number. Now, each of those have two pieces to the package tag. One is attached to the actual package. The lower half is perforated and can be pulled off to be used on your intake paperwork. So for you, it's a duplicate number. If you notice, the top half has the same identical number as the bottom half and the barcode. And the software works with any UCC 128 barcode scanner. So those of you who want to use the barcode scanners, you can. Now, if you are taking in a package, the top half will stay with the package. Bottom half you get to put on your intake paperwork. That will help make it easier for you to keep track of where your samples are and what connects. Because obviously your physical package will not always be with the person who does the data entry or the person who connects with the final information that's being put into the system. Transfers, manifests, the packages themselves, whether you are a collector lab or a lab that's sending your employee out to collect samples, the sample package must be made from the original package. Remember our 10-pound package picture we saw earlier. You will pull those samples yourselves, have definite control over that. But electronically in METRC, the sample must be pulled from that 10-pound package or whatever package you're pulling from. It could be a concentrate, edible, extract, whatever. And electronically it must be transferred from the licensee's actual inventory over to your inventory so that you can therefore pull from it to be able to do your actual test and ultimately enter of the test results. And when you enter your test results, you don't realize the old 80s song, I Got the Power. You have the power, because as soon as you enter those results, it is immediate that that licensee has those test results embedded in their original package. So by you electronically moving those test samples from their inventory package over and manifesting it to your facility, for you guys it seems like it's a manifest piece of paper for an employee to have with them to travel with those packages for law enforcement, and yes, they do need to have that, but also it is electronically moving inventory from one license to another. So I wanted to be sure that you understood that that's part of it, that electronic part has to happen, or you don't get any control or moving product electronically over to your inventory to test. Clear as mud? All right. So now we're going to talk about entering the results. In the system, if you manually enter, and I know you all want an API, and that is coming, we're just going to do the manual entry so you can see during and after results. All right? So the screen will look like this. You're going to have a specific package tag number that correlates with the RFID identifying number that you saw on that package tag earlier. And then you will do the date that you tested it. And then you have an overall pass or fail for the entire package. On the right-hand side will be the results. The result number 1 may be pesticides. Result number 2 may be microbiologicals. It could be potency, THC, THCA, CBD, CBDA. I'm speaking your language, I am hoping. So give me a nod if you are. So that you have your individual results that you are required by the state entities to enter. Those results will be put on the right-hand side. Now, of each result in and of itself will also have a pass or a fail. So you can pass a licensee's test sample for THC or a pass for CBD and fail for THC. So therefore the package would be an overall fail. You see what I'm saying? So you can have, if you have multiple results, like say residual solvents, and you test for butane, heptane, xylenes, you know, you can have a fail for butane, but everything else passes, or that didn't have any in it, had no level at all, okay? So then it would have an overall fail of the overall package for residual solvents, but on the right-hand side you would have a fail for butane up here on result number 1, and then you would have a pass for result number 2, which may be heptane. Does that make sense? And again, the state entities will decide what all you'll be testing. I'm just giving you general picks of what you'll be entering. If you don't mind, yes, please. Okay, so I'm going to show you that in the software. So when you have your entry, you'll have a username and a password. That's your password, or just your password. We don't keep those. We don't have access to them. That's a safety and security feature for you that you don't have to worry about us. We can reset you if you have a really good party the night before and you can't remember your password. We can reset it. Don't worry, okay? Right. So if I am at a producer's facility and we're going in taking samples, okay? Now you may go into a physical 10-pound package and you would be pulling your sample yourself, or you're the employee that would be pulling that physical sample and maintain absolute control over the physical sample. The licensee will then go in and take this particular 10-pound package and we'll submit it for testing. We'll get a new package tag number and we'll assign it the same name as whatever they're pulling from. So in this case, we're calling our awesome strain METRC Bliss, and we're pulling samples from our METRC Bliss bud. So we're going to create a package, our test sample of our METRC Bliss bud, okay? And let's say that, and again, you're going to set those standards of how much you're going to require per sample per test. There is one METRC package tag per sample per test. So if a licensee is testing for water activity and moisture, if they're testing for microbiologicals, if they're testing for potency, that would be 3 separate test samples they will create in METRC. And this will also help you if you're certified for potency, and then you're going to have to send on the other 2 samples for another lab that is certified for the other things. Since you're not, you can forward those samples on or have another lab come in and receive their own or take their own samples. So a licensee can have multiple test samples pulled from one package to do how many ever tests is required by the state entity. Okay? So in this case, let's say that we're going to take 5 grams out, because in my test sample here, this is what I'm required to put in, okay? And again, we'll pull 2 samples at the same time very quickly. And I'm not going to do a lot of talking right now. I'm going to do this really quickly to show you how quickly the licensee can do it themselves. All right. Didn't take long, right? So you don't have an employee staying all day waiting for a licensee to make a test sample. You saw how quickly that was. So we have our 2 test samples. You'll notice something though. Your original 10-pound, or the licensee's original 10-pound package is now says submitted for testing on the lab testing column over here, for those of you who are visual learners. So this submitted for testing right here tells the licensee, you can't do anything with that package. It's locked, okay? You can't manifest it to a wholesaler or a processor or a retailer. You can't do anything until the test results are entered. So remember what I said, y'all had the power? Okay? All right. So if we're doing all of your sampling here, you have 2 new test samples now. If you're certified for both and you're going to take both of those samples, then this is where the electronic part of it comes in. You're still holding on to the physical sample, okay? This licensee will make the test samples, and then they have these 2 samples. They will click on New Transfer, and they will say, I'm moving the product electronically from my location to the lab's location. Now, for this, we're going to put in the driver's information, which would be the employee collecting the samples. So for us, you'll have your marijuana permit handler number. You're going to have, let's have Scooter Brown drive us this sample, and I'm going to put in his driver's license number. and we're going to put in the licensee's phone number. Okay. Then we're going to put in what kind of car they drive. All right. So if you look at it, you're already setting up law enforcement to be very clear that Scooter Brown is driving in this car with this license plate, and these are the packages they have. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. We're going to send it to your license for your particular facility for the testing lab. You will have your own license number that will be able to be chosen in METRC. So they can either choose it from the drop down, or you can give them your license number and they can already have it pulled up. Okay. How we're going to get there. Okay. GPS, Google Maps. All right. The state entity will choose the transfer types. We're going to use a regular transfer for now. And since it's going from a licensee to a testing facility. Okay. It's not an infusion. It's not a wholesale. Okay.
The people on the online can't, we need to share, they still see the presentation.
Okay.
We need to.
All right. Sorry. Okay. So, for those of you who are just joining us through the web, we have entered the information, like I said, for the driver, the driver's name, driver's license number, phone number for the licensee who's sending out the samples, make, model, license plate, and the destination license number of the lab that is taking the samples, where they're going, how they're going to get there, what type of transfer, when they're going to leave, when they're going to arrive. They can manipulate the hours and the minutes of when they're going to leave and when they're going to get there. And then we're going to have our packages on there and making sure we have the right test samples. You can hover your mouse over the magnifying glass. Okay? And if you're going to be leaving at 10 and you're going to be arriving at 3 p.m., you can change that to 3 p.m.
I have a question. I know you don't want questions during the presentation, but I just want to let you know for some feedback. If there's 10 screens from now and I'm trying to explain my question regarding this screen, it's going to be really difficult for me to ask a question. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
Okay. Okay. Did you have one about this screen?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So in this circumstance, let's say that there's a driver who's going to go pick up one set of samples from one location, licensee, and then they're going to another and then another. So they might be going to, let's say, 3 or 4 spots. Do they have to write that in on this first, or you just have to do it per location and then the next one location that you put in the next set of address?
Okay, her question was, if an employee of a lab is going to several locations picking up samples, does the licensee have to put each stop in there? Here's the thing, that ultimately the state can weigh in on this, but normally you would have the licensee give direction from their location to the specific lab, because that's ultimately where it's going. Now you may be stopping here in 6th Street and 3rd Street and 2nd Street to get to your location, and each stop will say from their location to the lab, from their location to the lab. So you're going to have one from 7th Street to your location, you're going to have one from 6th Street to your location, 3rd Street. So if a law enforcement pulls you over with 3 samples that have been pulled from 7th Street, 6th Street, and 3rd Street, they're seeing that pattern of this is why you're heading back to your location. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and then if for some reason someone has samples and then they need to spend the night in a location before they bring them to the laboratory, does that estimated arrival have to be updated in all 4 of them?
That would be something, okay, the question was, what if the lab employee has to spend the night somewhere? That would be something that is going to be discussed with the state making the decision. And it sounds like TJ said, yeah, jump in.
So I can go into both of these questions a little bit. So there's sort of 2 functions of the manifest that Myra hinted at. One was the actual digital transfer of inventory. And the second is if you're pulled over on the road by law enforcement and you have a bunch of marijuana in your car, you need to show that it's legitimate, right? So on the former, just the digital transfer of inventory, we don't need you to document all the stops in terms of where it's going to the destination. For the police, it's probably in your best interest to, as much as possible, document in your planned route you're going to the lab via these other stops, right? Because if your lab is north and you're on I-5 going south, there might be a question there, right? On the second question of overnight, and this is, I think, something Amanda touched on before, those sorts of questions are going to be addressed in the transportation, revisions to the transportation rules.
Can will this form be customizable for drop-downs? Because it's a lot of repetitive information for drivers' license numbers.
It
make models.
It holds if you're using
Does.
the same drivers. Yes.
The question was, is this going to, is there any ability to customize the drop-downs and the on especially the driver and car information? And the answer was that once it's entered once within a licensed facility, then that information is saved in that drop-down that Myra can show.
Yeah, I'm going to show you here in just a second.
Yeah, so it will save it for future entry. So if you're a lab and you have repeat customers, it should be there.
Okay. This lookup, when you first start your license, this lookup area at the very top is empty. And people will call us and say there's nothing to look up. And that's because you haven't entered a driver's information yet. But later on, once you have one, their information is remembered forever. Yes. All right, you're welcome. Okay, so we have put all of our information in here to the best of our ability. We can hover our mouse over the magnifying glass, see that we have the right test samples. We haven't pulled out our 9-pound package and put it on a manifest. And then we're going to click that green register transfer button. You see that instantly the 2 test samples have disappeared. They're no longer in that licensee's inventory. They're now in transit on a manifest that is then printed and given to the employee of the lab. Under their transfers, they have an incoming, an outgoing. Yes, I won't leave you. Yes, you will have access to it. Under outgoing, there's that manifest you just created. You can even drill down and see to make sure that you have the right test samples on your manifest. And then once you say, okay, this looks good, you have an edit and avoid button in case you realize, oh shoot, I put in the wrong license number, or I put in the wrong driver's information. They have a new driver's license. All right. You can click on the edit button. It's going to take you back to the screen we were just in, and you can edit or alter any information you need to before you make it a final official manifest. You can void it if for some reason the employee says, my car broke down, I need to have a new employee come and pick up the samples. The samples are still, you can void it, it'll put those samples back into your inventory. Another employee can show up, you can create a new manifest with the new employee's information. If it all looks good, you can highlight the manifest, click on View Manifest. When you click on View Manifest, it will then show you the actual manifest you're going to print out. If the computer will cooperate here, sorry. There we go. There we go. So you have a manifest that has all of the pertinent information. and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. It seemed like we were a little overwhelmed there. So you can see the license number, that's the originating license number, where it's coming from, the name, address. You can see the phone number, where it's going to, your lab's license number. And you can also see the specific test samples with the corresponding RFID package tag number in its entirety, so that if law enforcement pulls you over, there is a package with the RFID package tag number on it and a corresponding manifest with the very same number. They can marry it up and know that you're on a legitimate errand. Yes, sir.
I asked a question. So if I'm a sampling lab, would the destination be the sampling lab? And then from there, I'd create another manifest once I got to my location and take it to a laboratory?
Yes, yes. And so,
I'm sorry, I don't work backwards to a previous screen that you were, so.
If I can just jump in real quick. The question was about, for sampling only labs, how the manifest will work. It depends where you're, if you are actually going to your facility and then going to be taking it to different locations, then yes, you would do it that way. But if you're just going straight to a testing lab, you would accept the manifest into your inventory and then create one there.
I don't think that's legal.
I
can't transfer marijuana unless I'm a wholesaler. I mean, I'm sorry, that I can only transfer it from my license, from a licensee to me. I don't have the ability to transfer it to another lab. I'm not allowed to transfer anything.
Labs can transfer lab to lab.
Okay, I've never seen that, but I'm not clear. I don't see where that's. I'll look into it, but I don't see where that's clear.
There's like producers can transfer producer to producer. So different lab types have different allowances of which license types they can transfer to, and labs can transfer to labs.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just so I'm clear. A separate lab can transfer from a grower to another lab?
Mm-hmm.
That's not really lab to lab. I'm not trying to be.
Wait, sorry. Producer to lab, right?
But then I would manifest, like I said in my original example, I would have the transfer would be to me and then a separate transfer to that lab.
Yeah, and you have to remember that the sampling laboratory rules are coming out with the proposed rules. And
so I'm not trying to be, but I mean, that's
so licensees can all transfer products. A sampling laboratory would be a licensee, so they would be allowed to transfer products as well. And those rules are still, they're not part of our temporary rule package right now. They're brand new. So you're just going to have to, wait till next week.
Yeah.
Everybody will be able to read them and we'll go through the process.
So this makes sense to you that a sampling lab would be filling this out, and if it was destination at the end of the day was a lab, an analytical lab, that my name wouldn't be on the transfer?
Oh no, you would still be on the transfer.
You're the licensee taking the samples in possession of them, taking them to another licensee.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, I will wait to see.
I have a question regarding this document. So you were saying that this automatically comes up, and is it like in a PDF form then? And then we can, if we're out, someone's out in the field, they can just save it, have it on their computer to show to an officer or whatever. It's not necessarily required to be printed.
Yeah, the question is, is a manifest required to be printed, or is on a phone or tablet or something sufficient? Physical means printed. You have to have a physical printed manifest in your car, which means either printing it on the producer's printer, having them print it on your behalf, or having a wireless printer or something that can interact with your phone in your car. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if, let's say you realized you put the wrong license number on there, go back and switch. And if you have, once you have the lab in there, you realize you're good, you can print off that manifest and send it on its way. Now, on your side, when the actual employee gets to the lab, they're going to go in and they're going to see that they have an incoming manifest that's sitting there. and you can be able to drill down and see what samples you're supposed to be getting. This is another checks and balances system for you to see, I have a physical package with this RFID package tag number, and I have a manifest that's in my system with the corresponding RFID package tag number, and the numbers should marry. So that should make all of you scientists very happy. When the numbers marry identically, that's a really good thing. So if you go in, you get the physical package, and now you have the electronic transfer that you're going to receive into your facility. You have a receive button all the way to the right. So when you click the receive button, you see here's my 2 samples that we're going to receive. Now, for those of you, again, who are scientists, you probably would not just receive 5 grams. It would probably be 5.001 grams. See, I do know you, don't I? I feel so good. Okay. So, and then the 2 would be, okay, because you just can't leave it at 2. The whole numbers bother you. I get it. So you'd receive it in, and then you would click the green button. If you need to reject it, there's a little reject button you can reject, and there's reasons the state sets up. So you can see this grays out. Now you go over to your packages inventory, and lo and behold, there are our 2 samples with the accurate quantities that we just put in that you actually received, your 5.001. Okay? From here, you're able to go in and test these samples. So I'm going to do this test. We're going to test packages. This is where we saw this while ago. You can test multiple packages at the same time, or you can go in and do multiple results. Okay? So let's do, for our 1 result, we'll do pesticides. We're going to pass that. And then we're going to do the aldecarb. And we'll do 0.5, which is a fail.
What is the quantity?
So in this case, if an analyte fails, pesticides would fail, right? So what we're going to require labs to do is if all analytes under an overall category pass, so for example, all analytes for pesticides you're testing have passed, all you would do would indicate that pesticides as a whole passed. If any analytes under pesticides or that category fail, you would put the category as failed and the individual analyte or analytes that failed with their specific quantities.
Will that data be able to be tracked so we can get some information on what pesticides are failing as an overall industry? I mean, that's got to be trackable data.
The OLCC will have access to all this data, yes. TBD. So this is a regulatory system first and foremost. You have access, as far as I know, to data that you are testing. Whether there is any industry agreement among data sharing, I would leave it to the industry to decide. There may be decisions in the future in terms of what data is available, but we're taking a caution first principle in terms of proprietary data in particular.
Okay, so in this example, and I'm going to do another one. So in this example, we're failing for our pesticide, and then we're going to fail the overall package. When we record the test, we see that the sample says test failed. Now, if we go back and we realize, I think that our numbers were wrong, we need to retest. We personally, as a lab, think it's not correct. So we can go back in, we test, and we find out that we were wrong, and that it does pass. and it was a data entry maybe. Let's go with that, okay? So we're going to say they pass the overall package. This test sample says test passed. Now, I'm just going to show you, just so you know, again, I'm going to use you have the power. If you go back over to the producer side of things, their lab testing status for their original package now says test passed. If they drill down on it, they can see all of the test results that you have entered into the system. The lab that entered them, each and every test result you put in for every test, the quantity, and even you'd be able to see the date, the time it was put in, etc. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you have, we're going to go back over to our presentation. For some reason, this computer doesn't like me.
Try minimizing PowerPoint and then do that.
Now let's try this. There we go. Thank you. All right. So as you can see, we have different test results that are entered, and I'm just going to give you a broad overview. And again, these may be different based on the state entities' requirements of what is to be entered, how it's to be entered. Those specifications are not in this PowerPoint because everything's still being finalized. So I'm just giving you an example of what the test results would look like, okay? So you would have the entire profile, the result for each one. The state entities can decide how many decimal places after that they need to go to, what's included, how many tests, what specific test, what the state wants put in, specific analytes, etc. So I'm just trying to show you, for example's sake, what you would show as test results being put in. The state can even have a requirement if do you want the testing facilities to put in, is it a single serving or a multi-serving item? If you have a multi-serving item, there's a notes section under every single result you have. And for each result, it's an open field. So you can type in your internal test number, if there's an internal batch test number that you want to put in, so that if a licensee calls you and asks you, hey, can I talk about this potency result, you can say, can you give me the internal number in the test results? And that would be very easy and quick for you to do. The state can decide whether or not, like I said, if you want to do a single or multi-serving, that you can put that in. Again, I don't know what they're going to decide. I'm just showing you various examples of what could be. Based on what you're testing, you would be testing, the raw material concentrates, extracts, tinctures, edibles, topicals, okay? So based on what you're putting in, there are those results. And again, that notes field is going to be very vital for you to be able to put in and see. Here's an example of an internal test number. And I know personally, if I have a licensee call and have a question about, I don't understand why this isn't, this is, it's not showing up on my original package. for some reason. I can go in on the testing side and look and give you your internal test number and say, can you tell me what's going on with this? Or so it's purely voluntary whether you want to put that in there, but that notes field is available to you. And then we see the failed test, how it affects the whole entire package, and how the licensee sees it as a fail as well. And if they have a failed test, they're not going to be able to send that particular product anywhere. They can try and put it on a manifest all day long, still won't go anywhere. Okay. And then other testing would be the R&D testing if there's a new product and they want to test it over and over again until they get their SOPs down. You can pull as many test samples out of one particular process lot or harvest batch as they need to in order to get their standardized systems down. If they're trying to make, we had somebody try to make ice cream, and they tested it 4 or 5 times till they got their levels right. That's what I'm talking about. So you can have R&D testing.
Before we move on, I want to make a couple of points. So first, the state sets up what shows up as tests to be entered. We will have all the values. So not every product is going to have to be tested according to all those values. So we're going to rely on you guys to know what products need to be tested for what and how that data is going to be entered. The second thing is that, like I said, this is a regulatory system first, and the system is going to shift soon so that the overall test result is based automatically on the test results for each individual test. So, for example, if you tested all the required tests and then wanted to add on R&D and you marked R&D as failed, that would fail the entire package. So we want to make sure, at least as we're all getting acquainted with the system, that we're not accidentally failing packages. So anything that's optional testing, we, at least in the short term, are going to keep out of the system. And you can find some way, either through a notes field or just license to license communication outside of the system, figure out how to communicate those optional test results outside of the system. Jeremy.
With regards to the comment that the laboratory would be responsible for knowing what tests the product needs to meet or what specifications that particular product needs to meet, that would, I think, go against the accreditation and kind of normal laboratory workflow where the client must request the testing on that product. So you're saying that it's now the laboratory's liability to understand what is required of that client's request and contract to us as a separate business to provide that testing from a regulatory standpoint?
So maybe I should put it this way. There's no way for the system to, based on the product type, only populate the tests that are relevant to that product type. So I should be clear, I'm not speaking to who the liability is on, because that's probably a larger question and probably not OLCC to answer. But I'm speaking specifically to the system. The system is going to have every single test value regardless of product type.
Okay. So then we could utilize our client request for these tests, their understanding of their specification on their product, and then we just translate that and transfer that into the system as we're releasing results.
We believe so. But again, that might be something that we need to check with in terms of that issue of who's sort of, quote unquote, responsible for that testing, or in terms of what is being tested for. Yeah.
So, it's my understanding, a lot of people test or want terpene testing right now. It's my understanding that it's not going to be the accredited scale requirement, but that might be something that a customer orders. Is that going to be able to be integrated into the system, or your sample is what's required by the state in the system?
So in the short term, we're only going to be putting in what is in the OHA testing rules. If you want So there's two ways that could be communicated back to them. So for example, if you want it to be communicated in the system, you could put it in a notes field, right? So you could say terpene, whatever, but that's not going to be a test type. Or you could, because you're going to be keeping all this data in your LIM system outside of METRC, just have some data, the optional testing data that is not put into METRC, and have some other way to communicate those results back. And METRC does not have to be the only way that you communicate test results, because for example, you might have more information or more detail for tests or results that you want to give the producer or processor. So we're not foreclosing any options for how you communicate that, but the required tests have to go into METRC, and METRC will communicate what is put into METRC back to the producer or processor. So you have other options in terms of how you're communicating other things if you want to do that.
Actually, several questions, if that's all right. The first is about the pass-fail. Is there any mechanism inside the system to compare that to a spec if and when the state decides they want to do that? My concern here is that regardless of level of training or familiarity with this system, that there are going to be very many data entry errors that, we got the API set up, we can simply just put our analytical data. But if I have to pay a person to go and sit there and go to 55 analytes or whatever, and I'm not saying that's the case, I just see this being a real point of risk for this unintentionally failing thing. So I'm wondering if you're just going to set up a table for particular like pesticides, right? It's going to be standard for everybody. So is it going to be able to automatically pass-fail things that are limit tests?
So you're basically saying instead of having to put both the quantity and whether it passed or failed, just put the quantity and have it automatically pass-fail? Not as designed right now, but that is something that I think, for the reasons you're laying out, would be something we would want to look into. And I'll also say the lab API is being developed for the very reason that you said, which is double entry is high cost in terms of labor and also will yield less quality data. So that's why the lab API is being developed. We want to minimize double entry as much as possible.
The next question I have is...
So before you ask that next question, I just want to jump in. This is Nathan. On that lab API, because there's a question on the screen about that, and I'll ask the question and then I'll follow up with some detail here. In previous sessions, it was brought to our attention that the API handshake required a certification for LIMS to METRC communication. Please remind us of the list of approved companies for that API handshake. So in the next week or so, OLCC and METRC together will release the list of approved APIs. It's going to be the first list of folks that have passed the certification. I don't believe there'll be a lab-related API on that first list, but there's one company that's fairly close for providing some API services related to labs, and I believe there's a few more soon on their way. And what we're going to do is we're going to just add to the list as companies pass certification. So it's not a final list, but there are going to be some first leaders, mainly related to point of sale, that you'll first see on the list. And then, and it's up to you whether you utilize these. No one will be, forced to use these APIs. You can always use the web-based system directly, so that you're not incumbent to use these systems. So I saw Jeremy in the back and then front.
I had an additional question.
Yeah, API related? Or?
No, if there's more API stuff, you guys want to talk about this question.
Okay, yours are API? Okay, let's do API real quick and then. Yeah.
Would a custom internally developed API solution, non-third party to the laboratory, be able to be certified?
So would a custom solution be able to be certified? And the answer is yes, as long as you can go through the process, that's fine. All the development documents are available on the METRC site.
And the way the certification works or the API works is every license has their own API key, and every API developer has their API key, and so the two put together would create that connection to the system. So if you're a licensee who develops your own API, you would get the API certified, and upon passing that certification would get that half, and you as the licensee would already have the first half, so you just put the two together. So it doesn't have to be a third-party software or anything. It's just if you have an API, you can go through the process, get it certified, and be credentialed in.
Okay. So the next question that I had was about multi-site labs and creating manifests for subsamples and also for samples where there's no regulatory requirement. Now, obviously, we have a regulatory requirement to track the inventory, but if we're entering information into METRC, are we expected to enter in, like, for instance, we might take a sample in Portland and split it into a bunch of samples, create a manifest for that so that we track it going down to Bend, but then are we going to have an internal requirement for keeping up on the total amount that was collected and subsampled, and then subsequent to that, our waste handling and our logging it out of our inventory, or is that also going to be part of the METRC tracking system?
Let me ask a clarifying question. When you say multi-facilities, they're each going to have a license?
Right.
Okay.
But they are, and the thing is, they act as one organization regardless of how many OLCC licenses we have for physical locations. So I can get that we need to do manifests between the two of them, but my point being, it doesn't actually change who, the legal entity that owns that sample is still the same. And for our internal purposes for tracking stuff and removing it from our inventory and logging it out as waste, that protocol is the same for both facilities. And so I'm just wondering if this is going to, if you're going to go down to net zero in METRC, so to speak, like, do you have to reconcile your inventory?
Within each facility, so your Bend facility is going to have different physical and digital inventory than your Portland facility. So the way it would work is whatever facility the package is in, within METRC, it has to be wasted out there. And maybe Myra can show how that would work, but the package gets adjusted to demonstrate that it's waste. And as long as you're following the requirements in the rule of how that wasting happens, that's it.
Okay, so if we create a subsample and send it to our other lab, that essentially has a blanket traceability for managing waste at these two locations. And then there was another question that I had, was more just generally, are these manifests intended to be part of the chain of custody for these samples for everyone, regardless of whether or not these tests are required by regulation? And then kind of just trying to think about how do I integrate this with our chain of custody protocol. It's nice we've got tracking numbers, we've got barcodes, all of those kind of things, but if we're required to keep physical manifests for moving things around, what's the long-term document storage requirement for manifests and chain of custody documents and things like that?
Are you speaking to requirements on the OLCC side or the ORLAP side?
ORLAP.
Then I would defer to ORLAP.
I think for that, it's going to go to the same side and say 10 years. Our lab specifies in the rules how long you keep your data.
Right. So my question being, is METRC going to, are these records going to exist in a way that satisfies ORLAP, or are we going to be required to create a separate source?
We would expect the laboratory to maintain the data for 10 years at your facility or any secure storage facility on site that they can access.
So to summarize here for those of you on the phone, the question is about retention records for things like transportation manifests and chain of custody of what you're going to be testing. And METRC does retain that, and you can pull up the transportation manifest for past transfers at any time. So that will be accessible in METRC.
METRC does keep that on file. You can, all of your transfers are saved for forever in your system till you, from day one on, you can pull it up. Just like with most everything, you even have access to your old archived packages that you have zeroed out. That still maintains all of that data, your test results, your waste that has been reported and put in there, the fact it was finished, if you unfinish it because you have a new employee, they made a mistake, they finished the wrong sample, something like that, that's all kept in METRC as well. So. All right. I don't have any more questions on that one.
We have a comment here from the call list. Strongly urge that METRC be able to interpret data value entered and compare to specification limit to determine whether the radial button gets toggled pass-fail. Any other comments?
Should the lab limbs do that?
Another question, shouldn't the lab limbs do that?
I didn't have a response to that question.
Yeah. So we'll take that under advisement there. Any other questions in the room? Yep.
Just follow up back on the API a little bit because I'm not fully clear on what you mean with that they are third parties. Like, what is the function of the third party exactly? Like, you have a LIMS system, you have an API, which likely is some HTTP protocol with an encryption key that authenticates you when I sign into it. Where does the third party come in?
Sure. So the question was, where do the third parties come in? So from what we've seen, the companies that have entered in to the certification process just have additional services, so ways for you to place lab orders and communicate pass and fail of packages. So they'll provide different services for you. I don't know if there'll be full service LEMS or substitutes for your LEMS. We'll have to sort of see what companies pass through the certification process. I'm not sure if there'll be substitutes, but they may be complements. I don't know if TJ has anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say it's, that it doesn't have to be a third party, but in the same way that I'm not going to develop, my own version of Word or Excel, I'm going to buy Word or Excel. So it's, if people can develop their own API like Jeremy, spoke to, then, that's great. And you, if you want to go down that path, you can go down that path. If you, like me, wouldn't even know where to start, you can, buy the service or whatever the contract is with a third-party software.
There's a question from the people online. Is there a user manual? Yes, METRC does have a user manual. As soon as you are put in as an employee and taken your training, you immediately under the support tab in METRC, there is the user manual available. Right now we have the quick reference guide. When you all go live and start taking your trainings, there will be the manual user guide for you. And it's fascinating bedtime reading, I assure you. It's more than you ever want to know about METRC, but it is there for you to peruse and be thrilled about.
And related to that, we're also doing trainings around the state. Scott Denholm and Todd Golden, who work for METRC, are doing trainings around the state. And before your license becomes active, you need to take a training and then pass it's something like a 20-question, 5-hour open book test that no one has failed yet. One of the questions is, what's the support number? So it's, sort of a perfunctory test just to make sure that you were paying attention and you know how to look up and answer. And as part of that test, as part of that training, the in-person training, the user guide is distributed.
We have had 2 people fail it.
Oh.
But very high percentage pass rate.
Up until recently.
This gentleman here.
Clarifying, I'd like to clarify something. So if there is a detection of, let's take your example, Aldicarb, and it is below the action limit,
is there the expectation that those values are entered? So we have a detection above the LOQ but below the action limit. We are to enter that result that indicate a pass. Is that clear? Is that correct?
We are requiring that if it's above the action level, it gets put into METRC at the analyte level.
So data that is
if it is
action
below the action level and above the level of detection and is a pass, we're not saying that you can't put it in. We're saying that you don't have to put it in. And METRC is separate from your limb system, right?
Okay, I know, but this is a little late. I'm curious to hear what OHA has to say on that, because that was an indication that everything is reported. I mean, at least some meeting a while back.
So there's METRC is reporting to OLCC. Whether there are other reports to other agencies other than METRC, they may have different requirements.
Are you reporting below your LOQ?
No. If it is above the LOQ but below the action limit.
Then you report it. According to us, you have to report that.
And who do we report that to? It sounds like that's not through METRC.
You have a client?
You have limb systems, it'll be reported in your limb system, and that's what they're interested in.
Well, but I guess I'm saying is that data doesn't, then this is not a venue for the state to gather that kind of information. So it doesn't, it only is going to be recording fails.
So this is sort of a compromise situation, because we understand that we don't want to put too much of a we don't want to create more of a bottleneck. And double entry of 50 or so analytes at every level of detail would mean much more time, potential error rate, et cetera. So until we have, the API up and running for sure, and we have, or other ability, it's a way to sort of get as much as possible without adding too much burden, basically.
Okay, so then related to that is, I guess the answer is, because I know during the data entry, there is nowhere to indicate what your limited quantitation is, and that's because there is expectation via audit or via your accreditation that is a demonstration that your capability is already
You have
consistent with that
study.
LOQ. Okay, very good.
Another follow-up on this one. I hadn't even thought about this yet, but so it sounds like we're going to be required to issue a report to the client and also interact with METRC. Is that correct? I mean, for OR lab accreditation, that's certainly correct, but I'm just wondering if OLCC will have any intention or desire to look at analytical reports outside of METRC, or if this is really just inventory management.
We, as OLCC, have the authority to request the fuller detail. We will have the most direct access, real-time access to what's entered into METRC. So METRC is again, we would love to have the full set of detail, but in the short term, we're focused on what the needs are, the regulatory needs.
And over time, as this evolves and as there are more APIs that can connect to our system, we may sort of revise that and take a look at how we can connect the systems better, so that you can give us more reports, and we can talk about how to enhance it. But this is also information that the Department of Agriculture is interested in. If there's let's say if they're responding to a pesticide investigation or something like that. That's really why it was set up the way it was set up, but that doesn't mean we won't talk about enhancements and changes in the future. Other questions?
Yeah, one more. So let's go back all the way to some of the original slides that you were showing in terms of where there was the information entered about the driver, et cetera, that scenario. What about the situation where, again, your sampling lab is part of your laboratory, and this is where I don't really understand the rules, maybe in terms of the way the transfer works on the producer, but are people allowed, the growers allowed to bring the product to the sampling lab from which we take the samples? Or is it always, the sampling lab has to always be done on site?
The producer
can not make their own sample.
Well, no.
The sampling lab is,
They're bringing bulk material and samples are taken at the sampling lab directly. There's no other transit involved.
the sampling lab is identical to all other labs in requirements and allowances, other than they can't test, right? So it could be either, to most directly answer your question. The producer could bring it to the sampling lab's licensed premises where the sampling could be taken, or the sampling lab could go out to the producer to do the sampling.
So I guess what I'm saying is, how does that look when that isn't relevant? So there's a situation where the lab is where the sampling is done, and the material is, so some of that information is not relevant. There's no transfer via vehicle.
There is transfer from the producer is bringing 10 pounds of marijuana to the lab, so they would transfer it to.
They have a driver, they create a manifest.
And all you do is you receive it on your end, if that's the situation.
Okay, so there's a separate. Okay, I think I got it.
So that previous, we were talking about ODA scales. So if we're going to set it up to have people bring in product, we're going to have ODA certified scales there just to verify that those batch weights are correct.
Yes. Anything other than the scale that's accredited during the ORLAP process needs to be accredited by ODA.
I have a question. I thought, last I understood, the laboratories weren't supposed to take on the liability of verifying batch weights. That was the responsibility of the producer, processor who's bringing the product in.
So I'm not sure where you got that information from, but within the system, the way it works is, as Myra demoed, anytime a transfer is received, the recipient verifies the weight. They have the ability to reject if the weights do not match. They have the ability to confirm what the weight is, but anytime the recipient puts in a weight, they are liable for that weight that is put in. So if you put in that it's 10 pounds and it's actually 5 pounds, the recipient is liable for explaining why there's a 5-pound discrepancy.
So TJ, this is Shannon. Do they have to accept the whole batch, or can they not accept the whole batch and just sample it?
You cannot accept a package in part. So there's ways it could be done. Either you could accept the entire harvest in, sample from it, and then transfer the remainder back. Or you could on-site reject the harvest, have the producer in your facility create a sample, and then transfer only the sample to you. What's that? Physical versus digital, right? So you on your site, you would physically sample and they would digitally sample in the same way that it would work if you went out to their site. They would have a manifest for the rejected package.
So just to clarify, so if there's a sampling lab that goes to a producer's site and they have 10 pounds there, the laboratory, that sampling laboratory has to verify on the producer's scale that there's the 10 pound? No.
It's only when you're receiving it. If you're going out to site, if you only need to verify as a recipient what you're receiving. So if you're never going to receive into your inventory a 10-pound harvest batch, you don't have to do anything with that other than the sampling.
So whatever we enter into the metric has to match.
Whatever you enter into METRC in your licensed facility account, you are liable for those weights. In other words, if you're entering 10 pounds, you should make sure that it's 10 pounds. If you're only receiving sampling, it depends on your business process, because you may not want to bring in 10 pounds into your facility, or you maybe do. So again, it's up to your business practice of how you're going to be engaging in sampling.
Here, Jeremy in the back, I think I have a question.
I think I have a question.
Okay. Over here, yeah.
This may sound like a silly question, but is there a standardized package with a recognized tare weight? Or are we going to have to transfer product physically from package to package every time we verify weights? I just realized that this is going to be a huge concern for everybody that works in my lab, because you can't do micro sampling outside of a sterile environment, and Anyway, so my head's spinning right now. Are you sure? I mean, are we sure on packaging configuration?
Questioning, is there a standard package for transportation? There's not a standard package, but I believe, and Amanda can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a, in rule, you have to subtract out whatever the weight of the package is, and then you can explain the differentials.
Written on a label or whatever, the tear weight should be specified, something like that.
I don't know what a tear weight is.
At the end of the bag. So when you go to the grocery store and you put your fruit in a plastic bag and you put it on the scale, that scale is certified by ODA or whoever. It has a built-in tear weight of 0.01 pounds. But then, for the weight of the bag. But if you change the bag type, like say you put it in a paper bag instead of a plastic bag, the checker is supposed to know the tear weight for all of those packages. And that's actually a regulatory requirement for selling groceries. I just didn't want to get this confused or tie up too much time, but that's a concern we have.
And so there would be two, I guess there's two areas where we check on that. We would check on that with ORLAP to see how they do that generally in their accreditation of scales, and we would talk to the Department of Agriculture, Weights and Measures Department to see how they do that generally in there.
Yeah,
So I'll add that to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so like Amanda said, for those on the phone, we can follow up with DOA and with ORLAP, but I think what we care most about is the weight of the product itself, right? That's what we're tracking in here. So, but we'll follow up on that for sure. I think gentleman over here and then in front.
Yeah. Maybe I'm a little confused at this point. If they're bringing 10 pounds to me, that's coming out of the first end, I'm supposed to be putting a tag on this, right? So I have to receive the entire 10 pounds and weigh it and verify the weights.
It's already been tagged on its way to you by the producer.
You only accept samples from less businesses.
But if you accept it into your inventory and then create a new package, if you accept so the 10 pounds when it comes to you will be tagged by the producer. But if you accept it into your inventory and then create your own sample that way, you would have to attach the sample tag. If you reject it and have them create the sample package, then they would have to apply the tag. Tags are specific to facilities. So whoever is creating the digital package needs to attach the physical tag.
So, so the process, basically the grower comes into the lab with a 10-pound batch. We reject it. They then basically go in and they essentially get a manifest for the remaining batch, but when we reject it, they immediately get a manifest for the entire amount to return back to their facility. At that point, they're creating a sample basically digitally. Would that weight then automatically deducted from the manifest for the return?
I have to think about this actually, because the problem is you can't create a new package if it's been rejected until you accept it back into your inventory.
So that means we have to accept the full 10 pounds in our possession, in our inventory in order to sample it. Well, the problem is the liability aspect. It will be on paper and then that is actually possession of this.
This is something we're going to add to an FAQ in the future when we have a clear answer.
Jeremy in the back.
Yeah, along those lines, it sounds like we're potentially going to have to accept those 10 pounds if we're going to sample the lab unless there's some other solution provided. If the laboratory accepts that into inventory, then we could then transfer that to any other license holder. Is that correct? Or do we have to transfer it back to the original producer? Because that would then put the laboratory almost in a wholesale situation.
Oh, no. Man, you have to listen to that question.
So the rules have specific allowances for by license who they can receive or transfer to. So we'll check that. And it might be something, we'll check rule and make sure that that's reflected in rule.
And for those on the phone, the question was, if you're a laboratory and you're transferred that 10-pound batch, does that enable you to transfer it to other license types? And so we'll clarify that in a future FAQ. So one question coming from online, is there a specific label, Avery or otherwise, to use to print the tags to adhere to the sample package? And the answer to that is, and can we show that, the purchasing screen? So the answer to that is that RFID tags are available. So there are two different types of tags. There are the grower tags, and then there are the package tags themselves, and you can purchase those through the same system that you log into here, which you can see. And it's, what is it, about a 3-day order period for these? Yeah.
Question on follow-up on that. What does the RF part actually currently use? Like, what does the RF tag do that the simple barcode tag doesn't do currently?
Well, so from OLCC's perspective, the big benefit for us is when we do our auditing administrative efficiency, right? We can come in and using a handheld, we can scan and know exactly how many packages there are in a room very quickly rather than having to count like we do on the liquor side with bottles. With outdoor grower tags, they're waterproof and are protected against sunlight, and they also have that barcode functionality on the top of them too. So if we can't get, if we need to get close to them, we can actually read them with the barcode. They can also work with your internal barcode processes or scanners too if you buy just a handheld.
RFID scanners that work with these tags?
So the question was, can you obtain the RFID scanners that work with the tags? And I believe the answer is yes. Sherry's coming up to talk about that.
Yes, we are working on an industry version for a handheld unit that there's even a little sled device that you could use with your smartphone that would have the same functionality. So that will be coming in the future. Well, with usually about 10 to 10 feet, depending on the environment. Sometimes they give me a little more, sometimes it's less. It's, if you got a metal in the room, it's advantageous and you can read lots.
It's spiteful there, but my first thought is like, if I ever want to know what my competitor's doing, I'm going to take my RFID scanner and walk around their building.
Yeah, no, it won't work. No, it wouldn't. Not. They're passive, so yeah, you wouldn't be able to. No, and especially if you had a commercial off-the-shelf RFID reader, you could go and see that there were. Oh yeah, I see numbers.
How many packages they have?
But it wouldn't give you any detail. As far as, if you were looking for volume of.
From a lab perspective, how many packages they have in stock is a viable.
Yeah, it wouldn't be viable to walk up to somebody's outside wall and be able to tell. And you might get shot, yeah. I need to check, but we'll get back to you the closer we get to deployment time, or not deployment, but when you guys will be working the system. Yes.
I have a question just to clarify the understanding of these tags. So let's say there's a producer who wants to get pesticide testing, water activity, THC, CBD, and then moisture. So they have to have separate RFID tag for each of those. So that means they'd be spending $1.25 per each package that they have, just for the RFID tags.
A package tag is 25 cents each, so for each package you have that you need to affix a RFID to, it would be that. But remember, this is only if you're going out to the grower, the account that creates the package digitally is the one that affixes the tag. So if you're going out to the grower is supplying the tags. This only comes into play if you're sampling on the lab's site.
Because you need to transfer it.
Because it depends on who in METRC is creating the package. Because the tags have to be put on the package at the moment that they're digitally created.
I'm not really worried so much about the tags and that, but at a minimum then, if I'm a sampler, I'll have 3 packages per batch. Because if I'm just as a high level example, micro, potency, and pesticide. Or do I take it all as a single sample for all my tests, and I have a single package ID for that one sample? The entire sample set, and then I break it up later, or do I have to break it up on site?
Are you talking about digital or physical? So, well, for our purposes, we've said that a container holding the physical package or packages has to be tagged. So
if I had 10 grams that I needed for all my testing, I could put it into a single package, and then it would be broken up digitally, but physically it could all be together, 10 grams together.
Each physical tag has to go to a digital package. So, and this is something we might need to think about and lay out in the FAQ, but you know, to be honest, I'm not as familiar with the sampling protocols with ORLAB, so I don't know what the requirements are in terms of package creation there. But so, for example, if you had 3 sets of samples that are 5 grams each, you could have it in one bag that is tagged.
But the 3 samples, when you say that, there's a sample, you consider a sample correlated directly to a test?
No, I don't think that's right. I mean, you're taking, sorry.
This really needs to be clarified.
When I looked at it, it seemed like that when I saw through the sample. There were 3.
We can also do a demonstration if that helps. After Shannon.
So this is Shannon O'Fallon from DOJ, and so I'm sort of more familiar with the testing and sampling rules. If I understand the question, it's like, so at what point do RFID tags need to be attached? So when you're taking a sample, right, you're going to have, for the most part, right, you're going to take one sample that's going to have enough material to do all the analyte tests that you need to do, right? So in transit, that sample is going to be a package and needs an RFID tag. Once that sample is at the lab and you're splitting it up to do the different analytes, it doesn't need, and OLCC people correct me, it's not going to need RFID tags attached to the, breaking up the sample to do the different analyte tests. So you don't need an RFID tag per, analyte test that you're running. Am I answering the question correctly?
What I saw on the screen was before I transfer, I'm creating these package IDs, and the package IDs are coming up as I'm sampling for a test, a particular test.
It sort of depends on what the testing lab is accredited for. If the testing lab is accredited for all the tests, and the lab is going to be doing all the tests in one place at one time, then it can be one package. If a sampling lab is going to have to take it to multiple places, then each place it goes to has to be tagged separately.
Yeah.
Moreover, if one lab is accredited for half the analytes for pesticides and then the other lab for half the analytes for pesticides, so it depends on the physical locations.
Everything you say makes so sense to me, but that isn't what I saw in the demo. When the demo, when she was going through creating it, those numbers were popping up when she was creating a test, a specific unit test, and then those were then being created, and that was being done as the sampling was being done. I mean, we can look at it again, but that's what it looked like to me.
It is an option. She's going to show you that you can actually do multiple tests out of one package as well.
Okay.
And I think ultimately what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do a recorded webinar, a recording that can be referenced on demand, sort of thing, that lays out a lot of this. Especially once we have more definitive answers.
So as far as outsourcing testing to another facility,
You could do it at that higher level.
We're taking
Could test the whole package.
pesticide mold and potency in on location, entering it into the manifest, and then it comes into the lab, and it isn't, let's say we're sending pesticide out to a third-party lab. That's, if I understand correctly, that's when another tag should be made, because it can be processed in the lab for the third-party
lab for testing?
If it came in one package, then yes, you would attach it. If it came in as a separate sample, like they sent, maybe you communicated with them and they knew you were going to handle 3, but then 2 other tests needed to be done that were going to go to 2 different labs.
So,
right?
and here's
so they,
that.
in that case, would make your package and the other 2, you would receive them in and then send those second and third packages to the appropriate labs that would handle the tests.
And what if it's the same lab at a different location?
Same thing, you would manifest it.
And tags only have to be affixed if it's a new package. So if you're just sending on a package that already exists, there's no retagging that goes on. So for example, a producer, if something's going to be sold as shake trim and it's harvested as shake trim, potentially every single step along the supply chain could have one tag all the way down to retail. It's only when you repackage something that you have to put a new tag on.
This may be totally off, but somebody harvests, they have 10 pounds, and they know they're gonna sell it in half-pound bags. Are they authorized that they then bag up in half pounds? And I'm trying to figure out how that happens. How does it get from 10 pounds to half-pound bags? There's a minimum number of tags. So I don't have to cut all these bags open to test. I'm just trying to see how this works in reality.
Well, the system knows what it was packaged from. So for example, the system knows so as it was harvested into a 10-pound batch, and then they turn that into 20 separate packages.
After we do the test.
I don't.
You're getting ahead of yourself there.
I don't know that we have.
With packaging pre-testing, and most guys aren't going to put 10 pounds in a single bag. They're going to put it into 5 2-pound bags or something along those lines, and then the sampling protocol would say that each one of those bags has to be potentially, depending on where the sampling protocol calls for it, but at least several of them would be open.
And again, you could have one tag as like a container, and within that you could have separate bags. So that's another way that, and a lot of this in terms of ease of sampling, a lot of this is going to be business to business figuring it out to make it easier on you guys. But ultimately the system is going to know the life cycle of packages, and if 20 packages came out of one 10-pound package, we can trace that genealogy.
Your suggestion, again, just to clarify, your suggestion is that if we are going to take a sample and then subsequently divide it into subsamples, whether or not the final destination of those things is known, we should create one package from that, like again, the example of the 10-pound lot. We're going to take 50 grams out of that 10-pound lot. That's one big composite sample. We create one package at 50 grams, and then we can create additional packages out of that, right? How does it go in here as it being called a test package, and then when you submit a package for testing, do you submit the original 50-gram sample for testing, or do you submit each individual test package that you created out of that? You see what I'm saying? So you're breaking it into subsamples. Each one of those subsamples for us could go to a different license facility.
It's still the submit for testing. So you're making, as a lab, you wouldn't create packages out of thin air.
Right.
For instance, you're always going to be pulling and starting with some source package. So that function for the lab would be, you're going to do a submit for testing, pulling a portion of an existing source package, moving it,
and then it'll track back.
and it will always trace back, right?
Yeah, so when we discussed this at the METRC training that I went to, I left with the understanding that it wasn't the laboratory's responsibility to package up the bags anymore into little packages like sometimes we do now, but we went out, we took a test package and we left with that one test package that whether or not that, and so please correct me if I'm wrong, whether or not that went on to any other laboratories for further testing, that had one label that stayed on that one package, whether or not that got resealed or not. And they were responsible for their product, not us. Is that correct?
I'm not totally sure I understand the question, but according to our rules, the lab has to physically sample and create those physical samples. But for purposes of METRC, digitally, it's still in their inventory. So the lab physically creates a sample package, and the grower digitally creates a sample package to reflect physical reality.
But as far as the 10 pounds go, it's not of the lab's
No.
responsibility to package that.
No, the way it works is when you create a sample package, it deduct the weight of the new package nets out from the 10 pounds. So and this goes to an earlier question where if you're going out to the producer's site, you as the lab never have to, you're not responsible for the weight of the source package in METRC. You sample and then they create that digital sample and you receive that digital sample into your inventory.
But it's also my understanding that the rules are changing to where now they can come into our lab with the 10 pounds, and then we can optionally package it into a 10-pound package, right?
You wouldn't repackage 10 pounds into 10 pounds though.
Into multiple bags or however they.
10 pounds.
So a package isn't necessarily a bag. It's just like it's just what they use like you could call it a package, but it's not necessarily like you're taking 10 pounds and putting it in a plastic bag. So that may be
You can have, you could have 2-pound bags inside of Tupperwares to create 10 whole pounds, and then that Tupperware could be your package. Right.
Yeah, it doesn't have to necessarily be, like, it's not like now when you have that no-seal package that you put it in every side of thing. Not necessarily like that.
Then my question is, so if they come into our lab, is it then our responsibility to ensure that they have 10 pounds? No, because it's already in the count.
If you receive it, anytime you receive a package, you have to accept it and you have to put the verified weight in.
Well, under what conditions would a laboratory receive all 10 pounds? If you want.
If the producer,
There you go.
so it's allowed under, there are two ways that sampling can happen. Either the sampler goes out to the client and samples on site, or the client drives the entire batch to the lab. That latter scenario is allowed under rules, but you do not have to participate in that way of doing it. It's a business decision. So if you decide that you want to have that as a business model, then when the 10 pounds comes in, you receive it and you have to verify that weight.
But they still go home.
They go home with the remainder.
So we can sample, reject it, and then.
Or they could, I mean, again, it's a business practice. You decide how that transaction is going to take place. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so that would apply to edibles as well, the entire batch.
One thing to consider, if you do accept it into your inventory, then you have to create the package tags. So just to close the loop on that, we talked about that before. So if you do bring all that 10 pounds into your inventory, you take the samples, you bring on that cost. I want to move us on. I know we've talked quite a lot about creating packages, physical versus digital. We have a question here, and I just conferred with our folks at ORLAP on this. What if a lab prepares extracts for testing and sent those onto a lab to shoot? The receiving lab receives vials of prepared lab samples. What about this scenario? Do I need to create packages? So under the ORLAP rules, another lab cannot do the preparation of samples for another. Just to be clear, not allowed under the ORLAP rules. Okay. Other questions?
I mean, the preparation of one lab and the analysis in the other. Like extraction.
And the Department of Transportation would never allow you to transfer those samples. Because they're either in a solvent or in a highly acidic nature.
There's a semantics issue going on here with, there's a term sample that's specific to an analytical laboratory, and then there's the sample that we're talking about, which is the larger check. I don't think anybody's talking about transferring the sampling that's
what we understood.
Yeah. Actually, that is a good sample, that is a good question.
Okay, so let's,
Is that something that's allowed and or?
So I'm gonna move us on, and if you have any specific questions about that, you should follow up with ORLAP later. Next question is, I subcontract pesticide tests, but I extract them. The business SOPs need to describe this.
Contact our lab directly. That's not
Okay, so if you have a question about this, you need to contact ORLAP about this. Let's see if we have other online questions. That's our last online question.
Can we get copies of the questions asked?
We can do that. Yeah, we'll send out a copy of all the questions that were asked through the online system, and also a copy of the guidance that ORLAP provided in the meeting today. We'll also have FAQs from the OLCC that we're putting out on this.
And we're going to put out a sheet just to collect some names and emails so that when we do distribute that FAQ, we can distribute it to the people who are here. So I'll put out a sheet. If you can just put either one person per lab, or if multiple people from the same lab want the FAQ, that's fine too. But we'll just have it. Okay, then we'll do that. Okay. Okay. If we're getting everyone, then we can do that.
Okay. Final questions? Okay, so there's a question, how we get it to the people online. So I should have your email address. If you're concerned if I don't, you can send it on the online question form right now. You can put your email address in. Otherwise, I should already have it since you got the invite in the first place. So we'll make sure we send it out to the full distribution list. So we'll be around for another 10 minutes since we're not quite at our 11:30 mark. If you have any questions, OLCC staff will be here, 2 ORLAP staff are here, and METRC folks are here. Again, we're going to make sure that the recorded webinar is available online. We'll definitely be doing some follow-ups, especially as we change the system to better align with the changes we're making. Make sure you subscribe to our listserv at marijuana.org.gov. Thanks so much for being here, and have a good weekend. Thank you, Myra.